non-rockaboutists must stop. I don't want to rock the boat. I want to sink it.
Are you going to bark all day, little doggy, or are you going to bite?
We're being delusional. I love you, Jeff.
Delusional, yeah. Delusional's okay in your worldview. I'm an animal. You don't chastise chickens for being delusional. You don't chastise pigs for being delusional. So you calling me delusional using your worldview is perfectly okay. It doesn't really hurt. She hung up on me.
What?
Desperate times call for faithful men and not for careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage.
Go into all the world and make disciples. Not go into the world and make buddies. Not to make brosives.
Right.
Don't go into the world and make homies.
Right.
Disciples.
I got a bit of a jiggle neck. That's a joke, Pastor.
When we have the real message of truth, we cannot let somebody say they're speaking truth when they're not.
Take an amazing journey to a place that will blow your mind and move your heart so you will never be the same again.
For rulers are not a terror to good conduct but to bad. Would you have no fear of the one who is in authority? Then do what is good and you will receive his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is a servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. That's Romans 13. Y'all, welcome up. I almost nailed it. I almost nailed that. Sorry. Welcome to Apologia Radio. I'm very excited for this. What?
It almost ended at the exact.
Yeah, I almost.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to fade it out and I missed it.
You're fired.
It's okay. I thought it was great still.
Yeah, it was good.
Appreciate that. Good. It's hard when you're trying to control all the things at once.
And wearing a vest.
And wearing body armor. Why, you ask, am I wearing body armor? Which I am sweating like crazy. It is warm in here. I am wearing body armor because we have a new sponsor, AR500 body armor. That's Armored Republic. And I'm wearing one of their.
I thought you got in a fight with one of the guys. Then they're like, "I'm just going to kill you," and so you're worried about your life being taken.
So I thought I'd rep them today. You can
Luke
visit
has
them.
a lot of grudges.
I do.
Held against him.
Yeah, obviously.
Well, I think we probably all do. But
yeah.
AR500.com, like I said, very excited to be partnering with them. Zach and I got to get a tour of their facility this week, which was really, really cool. We got to see how they make all their different levels of armor, and so yeah, I am wearing one of the vests. I'm wearing the steel plates, which are surprisingly very comfortable for being like 50 pounds. They're pretty comfortable, and I've worn a couple times out on the range, and you get used to it, and it's not too bad. So, but I will tell you, I want to tell you the mission of Armored Republic. The mission of Armored Republic is to honor Christ by equipping free men with tools of liberty necessary to preserve God-given rights. And actually, Kyle, I'm going to pull up the website right now. Oh, you know what? Hold on. I need to finish reading that. Sorry. In the Armored Republic, there is no king but Christ. We are free craftsmen. Body armor is a tool of liberty. We create tools of liberty. So, very excited. Like I said, here, go ahead, Kyle. This is their website if you guys get a chance to check out their stuff. We'll be doing more stuff with them. They're going to be sponsors at ReformCon, which I'll talk about in a second, and we'll be talking about them a lot. So I'm very excited to partner with them.
Yeah, I would just say order your stuff now, because they say when our freedoms go down, people are buying, land to get away if they need to, and also body armor, weapons, and stuff like that. So what did he say when we walked through? What did David say as far as why it spiked?
Because of Ukraine.
Yeah, because of the Ukraine situation. Yep. And, of course,
yeah, I'm sure before that he had a few other spikes.
Yes.
Like with all the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Just stuff not being available.
Yeah. Right. I would say...
tyranny.
Exactly. But if you're going to go buy it, which you should go there and buy body armor and all the stuff they have, just do it now, because you might be waiting for a little bit.
And they have promotions all the time, and they're actually... What's cool about them is, even though they could, they're not raising their prices on stuff right now. Because they could and really kill it, but they're actually. I talked to them again on Tuesday, and if you go to the website here, you see about the Ukraine war. They're actually supplying some armor to some Christian pastors there, in Ukraine, which is kind of cool. So
That's awesome.
anyways, that's why I'm wearing this today. I'm not wearing it just because, but there's a reason. Anyways, speaking of ReformCon, I'll go ahead and I'll go to that website. You can pull it up here in a second, Kyle. We announced last week that we've gone live with registration. Here it is, and I'm very excited about ReformCon. We're going to have some really great speakers, including, of course, Pastor Jeff, Pastor James / Dr. White, Joe Boot, Andrew Sandlin, John Sampson, David Bahnsen.
Uncle Gary?
Uncle Gary can't come now. He won't.
It's all right. He's
David
busy guy.
Bahnsen's he'll be a new voice.
Yes.
I'm excited to have him.
Yeah, very excited. So right now you can go and get the early bird tickets, and we'll have that for a little bit longer, and then we'll go to the regular price. We've been getting a lot of questions about hotel. If you go to the site and look, there you actually can get a suite discount at the hotel.
Like a SUITE discount or a SWEET?
Both.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So
a sweet
well played.
discount.
Sweet discount. So yes, you go there and they're booked lodging, and you can get really great rates. They're giving us for the rooms there, and we've also been asked a lot about family pricing.
Right.
That is coming, so be patient. We will be offering discounts for families. So yes, very, very excited about that. But anything else on that?
Just
No.
come and hang out.
Come
Please
be with us. That is October 27th through the 29th of 2022. That is Reformation Weekend, which makes it even more cool.
Extra reformed points for that. Just so you know.
Yeah, we
they all
claim
get
that
tallied
weekend.
up.
We claim that weekend.
I don't know
what?
who's doing
Reformation Weekend is ours now.
So. Right.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to get right in here to our guest. I'm very, very excited. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the Navy SEALs and how we've been able to get involved with helping them fight the cookie mandates, and we've had Davis on, the lawyer that's helping us out with that. We had on Jeremy Stallnecker a couple weeks ago from Mighty Oaks, kind of talk some more along those lines. And so Zach and I have been watching a lot of Navy SEAL interviews as well as Pastor Jeff. And I think Jeff sent us one probably a couple months ago, maybe, with our guest, Bill Rapier. I'm going to bring him on here in a second. And he was on Mic Drop with Mike Ritlin. And right away, I was like, this dude's a Christian.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we need to get a hold of him. And so I very quickly talked to some people that might possibly know him and got his number and was able to talk to him. And so I am super excited to have Bill Rapier on, who you were 20 years as a SEAL, correct?
Yes. Well, 20 years in the service, about 18 of them actually. It takes about 2 years to get your trident, so about 18 of it actually as a trident wearer.
And 10 years or 10 deployments with DEVGRU, correct?
10 combat deployments, yes.
Okay. So I'm very excited. Bill, why don't you just go ahead and tell us about yourself and what you're up to now, and then we'll ask you lots of questions.
Roger. So first off, thanks guys for having me on. Great to be here. My folks were missionaries, so I grew up overseas. I lived in Germany for about 8 years. I lived in Swaziland in Southern Africa for a couple of years. I guess my understanding at the time, I would say that I became a Christian at age 5. I still remember being in the backseat of a car and looking over and asking one of my buddies if he was going to heaven, and then saying the sinner's prayer, and then saying, well, I am now because I said the sinner's prayer.
Yeah.
As we can get more into theology as we continue, but I would question how looking back on that now, I would kind of question that as I grow in my understanding. So, but grew up in a Christian household. Germany was, interesting place. Was actually glad when we left there. and then loved Africa. Southern Africa is awesome. Actually, for a long time, my goal in life was to move back there and just do a game farm and take people hunting and raise cows. We moved back from Africa when I was 13 or 14 years old. Moved to Colorado, and so that was really the first. Well, this is the second time of going to an English speaking school or of a school stateside anyways. The first time was for about half a year. I'd gone to a private Christian school in SoCal. So it was somewhat of a culture shock, I would say, going to school in Colorado Springs there. I don't know, come about my junior year, I started playing sports and started partying a little bit and kind of, really fell away from being serious about my faith. And then kind of went along that line, never renounced my faith or anything, crazy, but definitely was not living, my life for the Lord. Joined the Navy the day after graduating from high school. I shipped off to boot camp. So did boot camp at Great Lakes, then went to Corpsman A school. So the way the Navy or the SEAL teams worked at the time is you had to have a trade that they thought was somewhat applicable to, on the periphery to the actual job of being a SEAL. So corpsman, or I guess normal speak for that would be medic, was one of those jobs. So went to Corpsman A school for a few months in San Diego after boot camp, and then checked into BUD/S. I think it was Thanksgiving Day of '94. Wow. Yeah, and
water was cold.
It wasn't too bad in San Diego at the time. That was El Nino winter, so we had great surf that year. Yeah, checked in, and took me longer than most to get through BUD/S. I think it was, I got rolled twice. So I got rolled the first time for going through training. I got rolled for dive physics. And the funny thing here was that it wasn't, so this is post-Hell Week. It wasn't really the physics part of the dive physics that I had an issue with. It was the fact that I had been using a calculator for so long to do long division that I had forgotten how to do long division, and we were not allowed to use calculators. So totally failed the test. Got put into a super embarrassing remedial math course where on day one, the lady gets up on the chalkboard and she goes, "This is how you add." It was a little bit embarrassing, but I did learn how to do long division again. And so aced my test the next time through, but still had a hard time with the runs. That was just something post-Hell Week. And I still don't really know exactly what was going on with me, but pre-Hell Week, never had any issues passing any of the runs. Post-Hell Week, I could not keep 11 or 11:30 pace to save my life. I was so far behind the pack. And so I got, I think it was day one of Draeger dive. So I passed, Hell Week in first phase, and then pool comp in second phase. That's the big, second phase test, and then failed a run in the morning and had to go to the basic training officer and stand in front of him. I remember him telling me, "Rapier, you've got two choices and they're both bad. One is cleaning out bedpans at Balboa, and the other one is going back to first phase." And I said, "Well, sir, I'll take first phase." So I had to go to supply and trade in my brown t-shirt, which is probably the most coveted item in BUD/S is you get your brown t-shirt after going through Hell Week. So had to trade the brown t-shirt in for a white one, and then join up with class 201, which is the class that I ended up graduating with. And it ended up working out well because the pace of the runs was slow enough still with that class that I was able to build up slowly. And so graduated BUD/S. Took about a year or so to get through, then went through the dive med tech course. So basically understanding dive physics and how to treat that from a medical perspective. Then drove out and did basic Army Airborne School. Then went to 18 Delta. So I got to go to the last class in San Antonio, which was great because San Antonio is a much better place to hang out than Fort Bragg. Which is where everyone has gone since then. So did our medical class there, and then 96 drove out and checked into SEAL Team 3. I did a couple of years. And if you want to stop me at any point, let you know.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you.
Yeah, just keep going.
So I did about 4 years at SEAL Team 3. Kind of while I was there, I found out about this place that people just kind of whispered about called DEVGRU, and I'd never even heard of it. And then as soon as I found out a little bit more about it, I'm like, well, that's the place that I want to go. When you're a brand new guy, you don't even say that. You just, focus on being a new guy, and that's a secret that you want to do that someday. And so I screened for the command after my first deployment and screened positive, and a couple months after returning from my second deployment. So when I say deployment, that's a workup and a deployment. So about 1.5 to 2 years for each cycle of the platoon like that, or at least that's what it was back in the late 90s. So after returning from my second deployment, drove out to the East Coast, and then I ended up staying at the command for the next 14 years or so.
Wow.
Until I retired. So I retired out of there in June of 14, and I've only been back to Virginia once since then. We basically, on the day after I was officially retired, we'd already been living in a camper, and we'd sold our house. We'd been living in a camper for a few months, and so the day after I was officially done, we started heading west, and great adventure. It's almost 8 years late. I mean, wow. Really amazing to think it's 8 years and an additional 3 kiddos later. And and here we are.
And you have 6 kids?
7.
7.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
The youngest is 8 months now. So
that's awesome.
How old's your oldest?
14.
14. Awesome.
Very, very cool. So we'll get into what you're doing now here in a minute. So just to backtrack, I want to ask a couple questions. I think if I remember correctly, even though when you got rolled that first time, you didn't have to do Hell Week again, correct?
I did not have to do Hell Week twice. No, that was Hell Week beat you up pretty bad. So
yeah.
Both of those times that I got rolled, and then especially the second time where I did have to join back with first phase, they did not make me go through Hell Week again, which was very nice.
Yeah, seriously. So aside from the math and the running issues, what would you say the hardest part of BUD/S was?
Hands down, being cold. No set. And any guy that went through a winter Hell Week will say being cold is the worst. If you ask guys from summer Hell Week, some of them will say running with a boat on your head. I think we barely even ran with boats on our head before Hell Week, and it was just because we had such good surf. It was that El Nino year.
Yeah.
So there was days when there would be 6 lines of surf out on the strand, and with tubes that would swallow. They'd fold your IBS in half, and everyone would disappear for a moment, and then you come bobbing back to the surface. So actually, not only the instructors enjoyed watching this, but all of the SEAL teams that were out there, guys would just come out and sit on the berms and just watch us get hammered up there, because it was actually pretty fun. Like in retrospect, much more fun, paddling through the surf and getting crushed than it is to run up and down the beach with a boat on your head.
Oh, seriously. So Zach is actually from San Diego. So how old would you have been? You said that was about 94?
Yep.
How old would you have been?
I would have been 15.
So do you remember that El Nino?
Yeah, I remember the El Nino because it blows all the good fishing up in there, and so you can go out and catch, yellowfin and bluefin and albacore. But man, that's such a blessing because the water is so much warmer. Because I was thinking about you going through it during, Thanksgiving time. It would have been pretty chilly down in the 60s, but that El Nino makes everything warmer. So that was definitely a blessing for you.
That's awesome. And you actually, I was listening to some more interviews again today to refresh my memory. But you actually graduated high school early, correct?
Yeah, I was 17. So just bouncing back and forth. So the German school system better than American school systems, at least academically better. So when I came to the States the first time, I was way ahead. And then when we moved to Africa, I was way behind because I'd been, it's embarrassing, but because I'd been at a private Christian school stateside for half a year and it had really slacked off. So I actually got rolled or held back a year in Africa, and then had to do a bunch of tutoring and whatnot to get me back up to speed. And then anyways, when I moved back stateside, they said I should have entered as a freshman, but they had me take a test and they said, well, you can come in as a sophomore, which was great.
So how old were you when you graduated Great Lakes, and were you still 17? 17,
yeah.
And then
I turned 18 right before checking into Buds, about a month before. Yeah.
What was that transition like? And I want to ask you some more questions about growing up as an MK, but like, what was that transition like going from an MK to you're 18 years old and you just joined Buds?
It was, it was obviously a big transition, but I would say a lot of it I had kind of shifted down a different path, away from the straight and narrow for maybe the last 2 years, of high school. So it wasn't a massive, it's just that a lot of the other people were doing the same stuff that I was doing.
Yeah. Gotcha. So I'm really interested more in, like I said, in what it was like being an MK. So my mom was actually an MK. My cousins were MKs, so I'm very familiar with that sort of journey and lifestyle. So tell us more about what was that like. I know you were in several different countries, so tell us more like what that was like just as a kid. Because I heard one thing you were saying, I think to Ritlin, where you're just like, I just was a kid. I was skateboarding and. But then, like, I'm curious how that impacted you then once you joined the Navy, and how maybe some things you learned as an MK positively or negatively affected you once you joined the SEALs.
I would say probably the biggest shaping thing of just growing up overseas, especially when you are the only American kid at your school, is you see things from a much more international perspective. And then also you just, geography makes more sense to you, and, understanding different cultures. I think there is, that can be a problem with if you don't leave the States, or you don't leave, your state at all. Like it's very, becomes very, you think the way it is, where you live is the way it is everywhere in the world. And so that is one of the benefits of being an MK, is that it was very easy to pick up, make new friends, see that things were different. I mean, I was pretty good at picking up new accents, like from different parts, like, Bavaria is they speak German a little bit differently there as they do in Langhagen up by Hanover. It's Hochdeutsch up there, which is a little bit different German. So, doing that and then moving stateside. And I remember wanting so bad to be, American. This was an interesting, just aside. I remember one point thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I've lived in Germany longer than I have ever lived in the United States. And that really bothered me because as very much part of my identity at the time was I'm an American. And I remember making a conscious decision that I'm going to stop thinking in German and I'm going to I'm going to think in English, and I'm going to try and speak more English at home. Just because that was something that was important to me. So I would say that's another thing that is, just kind of looking back on it. They used to say this about the colonies and in the British colonies, that the colonists were more British than the British were. And I, at least from what I've seen, I completely agree with that. I mean, just looking at when I lived in Swaziland, it was very much, there were school uniforms and you had assemblies in the morning and you sang, "You Are My Sunshine." And, there was, I know there were prefects that would run around with sashes on and they got to tell you what to do. And it was a different thing. But then also, that American identity was very much a part of me. I mean, when we lived in Swaziland, you could go, if as an American, I could go to the ambassador to Swaziland. I could go to his house, and he just had a local indigenous guard at the gate. And I would just say, hey, I'm an American. And he would let me in, and I could use the swimming pool. Wow. And any of the Americans that were there could use the pool. And so that sense of, hey, we're all the expats kind of hung out together, and like we'd watch the Super Bowl at like 2:00 in the morning. And I don't think I even understood the rules of football until like a year or two after moving to the States. But it was just a cultural thing that, hey, we're Americans, and this is what Americans do. We're going to gather with other Americans and do this. So, so that was definitely shaping, in my life, and kind of interesting, I think, to look at it now, because now I look at my identity so much more as Christ follower above everything else. Yes. I've spoken at that at once or twice for we do a Independence Day celebration, and just laying it out that, hey, this is, America's great, but kingdoms rise and fall, and God's people continue.
Yeah, sure.
And so just, I think it's just interesting now looking back on it of how much like I really had that I would say more of an American identity as a, kid, and then as a young man, than I did as looking at myself as a follower of Christ first and foremost, and an American, second.
Well, we're going to get into that for sure here in a little bit. So I forgot I was going to ask you. I think you said that you got into some trouble a little bit there your last couple years of high school. What kind of issues did that create for your parents who were serving as missionaries, and you were fighting or drinking and partying, whatever? Like, how did that cause issues? I was just curious.
So I was pretty good at hiding it and not being, overtly rebellious. I've apologized to my parents since then, for lying to them. I was sneaking out and, drinking and whatnot. I was, and I think part of where I maybe had a little bit of leeway was just in the fact that coming from Germany, in Germany, I think you can buy beer when you're 14, and just the culture, like sure. the pastor of the church that we were at had a full liquor cabinet, but his wife thought that it was highly indecent to put on makeup. And so it's an interesting, interesting cultural thing there. So I think because of that, it was somewhat easy for me to say, oh no, I just had like one beer, and get away with it a little bit when obviously I had been consuming a little bit more than that.
Well, just curious. So what kind of work did your parents do? I think it sounded like you maybe were supporting local pastors maybe in the places you were at.
Yeah. So my dad, he started working for, I think when he started, it was still, I think, Overseas Crusades. The organization started in the Orient. So it was called Oriental Crusades. Okay. And then when it started growing globally, it became Overseas Crusades. And then when Crusades fell out of favor, it became OC International. And then I think now it's just called OC Global. At the time when we were with them, the model was very much send the American missionaries overseas to work with local pastors. Yeah. It wasn't like the church planting type missionary. It was work with local pastors. That has since morphed to what I think is a better model where it's a lot more supporting indigenous folks with American enablers, to put it in military terms, American enablers or pastors or teachers going over there and helping with things. And so my dad started his own thing back in it would have been like mid to late 90s. He started African Leadership Development, and then he's been still working. They actually moved back to they moved to South Africa then when they moved back there after I joined the service, and that was because apartheid that regime had fallen. Mm-hmm. So they moved to South Africa, and then worked a lot in Zimbabwe, and now Mozambique as well. And so
Okay.
they've got some orphan homes that they're helping with, and then also helping develop the local pastors.
Very cool. My my great grandparents were missionaries in Africa, Kenya, Rwanda area. That's where my grandfather was born, and then my grandparents they were in the Belgian Congo in the 50s. That's where my mom was actually born, in the Belgian Congo. 57, they ended up having to flee because of civil war and stuff, and were not able to go back. But so I very much have a heart for Africa as well. Just curious, growing up as an MK, did you ever hear of the Rift Valley Academy in Nairobi?
Yeah, I did hear about it. Yeah.
My great grandfather helped build that. So. Yeah.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, we
That's
actually
cool.
have pictures. I should have had them up. I have some cool pictures of they were there. Teddy Roosevelt was there on safari and laid the cornerstone and stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's cool. That's cool that you actually.
That is
I
cool.
figured because that's where like most of the missionary kids, even today, they still use a lot of MKs go to that school in Nairobi. So very cool. That's exciting. Do you guys have any questions before I move on to the next subject?
No.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I think one of the things I heard you say with Ritland that immediately was when I was like, I got to get him on. I think it's when you were, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's when you were screening for DEVGRU and they asked you, when they said, well, the Bible says thou shalt not kill. Wasn't that when you brought that up?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. So when I heard the answer you gave him, and I was like, okay, he gets it, he understands it. So I'm just gonna let you go with tell us that story and your response, and we'll spend some time on that.
So I'm in front of a board. So I'm screening to go to the command, and I'm in front of a board of a bunch of senior enlisted guys, a psychologist, a doctor, a couple support people. And it's this horseshoe set of tables, and you're sitting in the middle of it, and they're asking you all sorts of different questions. And then at one point, the psychologist psychiatrist says, "Oh, I see that you say that you're religious, but the Bible says thou shalt not kill, and you're trying to come to an organization where that might be required of you. How do you rectify those things?" And I just said, well, David was a man after God's own heart, and they wrote songs about the number of people that he killed. Right, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. So I said, I don't think it will be a problem for me to do the same thing.
Right, and then I think, because I heard you tell Ritland as well, then the word there in the Hebrew is not kill, and that, we hear that all the time because we have a huge, obviously within abortion now, we're trying to, end abortion, and the topic of the death penalty comes up a lot, and so we hear that, well, the Bible says you shall not kill. It's like, well, that's actually not what it says. It says thou shalt not murder.
Murder, yes.
Right, and so there's a tremendous difference, and so I'd like to hear, as someone who spent 20 or 18 years as a SEAL, like, talk about that, the difference between kill and murder, because obviously that's something that affected you on a daily basis.
Hugely, yeah. So I guess for me, it was never even a question, honestly. Like, from a young age, I was taught that murdering people, okay, I hate you, I don't like you for whatever reason, I want your stuff, I'm jealous of you, and then killing them, that's murdering someone. Shooting someone that is attacking your family or going to war and killing people, that's not murder. So to me, that was never even a thing. Like, it was not until significantly later that I even met someone that I was, in a Bible study with, that was absolutely a Bible believing Christian, that was actually thought that all killing was wrong, regardless of circumstance. It wasn't a thing at all. As I've started teaching now, and I give a mindset talk, and anytime I do a 2-day class on the beginning of day 2, I do a mindset talk, and as part of that, we will talk about killing. And I actually throw that Old Testament analogy out, or not analogy, but I just say, hey guys, there's, how do we, is all killing wrong?
Yeah.
and, you know, kind of let that absorb for a minute, and then say, okay, well, there's this book, and in that book, there's a set of rules. And one of those rules is thou shalt not kill. So how do we rectify that with every, you know, and I'll ask them beforehand, you know, most of the guys are like, no, it's not always immoral to kill someone. And then I just kind of lead down the trail of, well, the word that's used more frequently is used in the context of murder than it is in the context of just manslaughter or anything else. The ancient Hebrew texts, or if we look at, there's plenty of examples of, if the axe head flies off and strikes your neighbor, it's this penalty. If someone breaks in during the daytime, it's this penalty. If it's at nighttime, you can kill them. Like they had different rules, and so the ancient Hebrews had different words for killing, just like we do. So while the King James version is not incorrect by saying thou shalt not kill, because if you murder someone, you are killing them. However, it is more correctly translated as thou shalt not murder, because not all killing is murder. And it is super important that we, that we do wrap our head around that, because if you get that wrong, and coming out a little bit more from the protecting yourself side of things, if you deep down inside think that the taking of all life is wrong, then that could lead to hesitation, and that hesitation can lead to regret, because something happened that you were the guy, you were there, you had the tools on you, you had the training, but then you were still questioning things in your mind. And that's really why. So when I talk about this, I'll talk about it in terms of willingness. Yes. And it's so important to understand what our willingness is, and to have thought through these hard things prior to being in a stressful situation, because that is not the time to start having those, oh, is this really the right thing to do? You have to do what we call pattern recognition, right? You see something and you don't have to go, well, I'm seeing A and B develop. Now the kind of the ears come up, and now C and D and E happen, and then F is you dying, right? We should be able to see A, B, and C, and then go, well, I know where this leads, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip forward and do something to stop this from happening, right? But you only get that by pattern recognition, and by training for this. So I guess back to the context of the Bible, it is so important as followers of Christ, we need to know what this book actually says. And then we need to apply it to our lives, because you can't go, well, I believe this stuff, but there is this thou shalt not kill, and I'm just going to ignore that part of it. And that's very, you end up with a very fractured theology if you're just going to gloss over stuff because you don't like it. I mean, we have to look at it and go, what does it actually say? What does it actually mean? And then go from there. Yeah,
it makes complete sense for them to ask you that question, though, because I'm assuming you've been in situations to where if you hesitated because you felt like you were doing the wrong thing, you'd probably not be here, and people around you would have died as well. Am I correct?
Yeah, I mean, so at work, honestly, it was never a thing for me. It was very much, okay, this is what the ROEs are. And there were times where I did not shoot when I could have shot, and it's because I was giving people the benefit of the doubt. So it's not just, well, this is what the ROE says and it's cut and dry and we're going to shoot regardless. There was times when I didn't shoot because, there was enough other circumstances there to where I was going to let it play out a little bit. But it is, you have, I know where I was going to go with this. As I have thought about this more, and just realizing that I am in a position of, I'm in a position of authority when I'm sitting there and I'm talking to guys about fighting and protecting yourself and your family. The guys are going to listen to what I say, and so it is really, really important that I get it right. So I've become more serious, right? So just because it's right to do doesn't mean that we should be nonchalant about it. I mean, there was times where it was like, oh yeah, that was awesome. We just shot those dudes, high fives all the way around. And it's like, God takes the shedding of blood seriously. Right. Not that it's wrong what we were doing, right? But I mean, David did not build the temple. Solomon built the temple. And my understanding is, in part, that was because David killed a lot of dudes.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I think it is really important to lay that context to say, well, it's not wrong, and you shouldn't feel wrong about it either. That's another thing that I think is a real common. It's this cultural thing now where they. I mean, you look at any, movies about killing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I remember my first time. Do you ever get over it? No, the pain's always there," and all this stuff. And it's like, I didn't have that. None of the guys I worked with had that. And to some extent, it's the guys that you're working with, and to some extent, it's thinking about things ahead of time and going, "Hey, well, I'm not doing something that is morally wrong."
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It is something that is heavy. Right. The taking of life is it is a serious consequence. I mean, I believe that probably the majority of the people that we killed did not know Christ and therefore are in hell. And so it is a super heavy thing. But that doesn't make it wrong. And you shouldn't feel bad about doing something that is wrong. But also, I think I erred on the side of just, high fives all the way around, maybe treating it a little bit too lightly, especially initially on in my career.
Yeah.
Later on, I would say I got more,
maybe sober-minded,
maybe a little bit more solemn. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. I mean, I do remember actually praying for guys when we're for the enemy, when we're I knew that missile strikes were inbound, and we were going to be landing right after the missile strikes, and these dudes are all going to be dead here shortly.
Yeah. Wow.
And just praying,
That's awesome.
that, I mean, what they say to pray for the Muslims is that God would reveal himself to them in dreams and visions.
Right.
Which is happening all across the Islamic world.
It is.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so glad you brought that up. I'm just curious, how does that change your perspective when that's what you do for a living compared to you're working with guys that maybe are atheists or could care less. They hate the enemy. They just want to destroy them. You know what I mean? How did that affect your approach at all? You know what I mean? You get what I'm asking? I'm just curious how that perspective changes you. It makes you different from those that you're working with.
Yeah.
I guess for one, let's not paint too rosy a picture of me.
No,
there was definitely some stuff where I, strongly disliked the enemy. I mean, shoot, so many of my friends have been killed by those guys. Sure. It is something that I have to pray for, that God give me a love for these people, and and being able to say, hey, the answer is not killing them all. The answer is they need Jesus. Yeah. Right. That is the win, is to share the gospel with those people. Because ultimately they're on a path to hell, and that's really sad. And so the true win is to share the gospel with these folks. So that is, I've had varying levels of maybe empathy or, that it's been something I've struggled with, is being, being upset at those people, just, because a lot of my friends aren't with us anymore. And, all of them died at the hands of Muslims. So,
yeah, no, I appreciate that a ton. And I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate your knowledge and understanding of the law of God. That's something we talk about a lot. And, you mentioned the flying axe heads and all that, that warms my soul. So thank you very much. And it's important. Like you said, it's important that we know what Scripture says and why it says it. And so I love it. So before I transition to the next subject, I did want to ask you, was it difficult at times being a Christian and being in the SEALs? I think it was. I watched the Cleared Hot interview with Andy, and I think he was. I mean, I think you worked a lot with him, and it seems like he was everyone knew you were a Christian, but I think he made a comment maybe you were actually willing to talk about it, and so I'm just curious, was it really challenging at times to be in that community and try to live as a Christian?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of probably a lot of stuff that I would do differently if placed in the same situation now. There's a lot of stuff where I thought, I was doing the, in the world, but not of it. And, where are the lines there? But yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a lot of things where, I mean, it was interesting. Some of the going through selection, I mean, and this was really, this was a good thing that I a lot of times was not getting counseled on performance. Guys were grilling me on some of my beliefs and practices.
Wow.
Which it was a great, I didn't really like it at the time, but looking back on it now, I'm like, man, that's awesome. If they're asking me about my faith and why I wouldn't or would or wouldn't do certain things, and that's much better than talking about like, why didn't you go right into this room, and why were your shots low on this one or whatever. So yeah, definitely challenging. There's definitely times where, I mean, I did spend a lot of time, especially as a younger guy, still hanging out with the guys, but just not drinking or drinking not very much. And then, once I got married, I'm like, I want to hang out with my wife. I've spent enough time hanging out with the guys. So that kind of went away.
Well, that reminds me. I just thought of Proverbs 22:29. I love this verse here, but it says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men." And so, you're someone who was very skilled at what he did and was at the highest level, and that puts you, like it says, before kings, and not before obscure men. But what's cool, I love what you just said, is they weren't even questioning you about your skill. They were questioning you about your faith, which I love that. It's awesome.
So pretty cool that you bring up that verse, because my wife was just quoting that verse right before I came down here, because my son made a really good salad for me and I was complimenting him on it. And she said that verse, like,
that's awesome.
That he was serving well.
That's
so
awesome.
pretty cool.
Oh man, that's cool. So I think naturally we could transition. I want to talk about Romans 13, because we get a lot of criticism, being that that we're theonomists, that we stand for the law of God a lot, and what we always hear, like Romans 13, obey the government, and but ultimately, like, that's what you did. You were God's deacon. That's the word there. You were the avenger of wrath, the sword to punish the evildoer and to protect the innocent. And so I'm curious, because you, hearing what you said a little bit ago, you probably didn't really think about that when you were in, but now that you're out, you probably appreciate that more.
Yeah, that's honestly, I hadn't looked at it a whole lot that way. It's interesting. I've never thought about, the whole, he does not bear the sword in vain or in vain. Like, it's interesting. Like, I'd never looked at myself in that. I guess I'd always looked more of like local authorities, your police, your sheriff's deputies. Like, I'd always looked at that more, but I guess, I guess I did fall into that as well.
Yeah, sweet. Well, I'd love to have that conversation with you more. Yeah. Oh, cool. That's how I look at you. So, anything on that? Dex?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a whole.
Go for it, dude. Jump in.
I mean,
he's been answering all my questions before I even
has.
get to them. So,
and the first question I had, you just asked him. But I was just thinking about all of your combat operations. And of course, don't talk about what you can't talk about or what you don't feel comfortable with. But has there been examples of God, you just seen God like just move in a situation, just like the hand of God upon your life when you're in a sticky situation or a combat situation? Do you have, I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of them, but maybe a couple or.
So two things kind of stand out. One was one of the first ops that we did into Iraq in 2003. And we were, I think, the third helo in. We were in on a 47, and they didn't get permission to drop the power until basically we were on short final, I think. So, or the lead bird was on short final. So they took out this massive transformer, and it just backlit us as the helos were coming in from the city. So it was a bit like the first helo came in, dropped off blocking positions, and like kind of the bad guys started waking up. Second helo comes in, and they set up you know, a corridor for us to do the assault, and like the guys were waking up, and those guys got shot up a little bit, and then our helo comes in, and we just got shot up pretty good. Yeah, I mean, so it was, you know, like something out of Saving Private Ryan, as far as just like sparks and, you know, like seeing sparks in the helicopter. I remember looking out, I was in the back right window on the 47 right before the ramp, and we actually got the lead, or the starboard side forward door gunner got shot in the head. And actually that guy survived. We got two guys shot on that one. That guy survived. One of the Rangers was shot in the gut, and he ended up dying of infection a couple months later. But we looked at the helo the next day, and I mean, it's like a cartoon where if you were to draw the outline around where I was standing, that's where all the bullet holes were.
What?
Wow.
So yeah, that was one in Iraq, and then another one in Afghanistan, in Helmand area. I just remember, like, it had been a pretty sporty op. Like at one point, I think we were taking fire from 3 different sides, and, you know, calling in AC-130. So big 105s going off close enough, and this is before the amplified hearing protection. So I had no ear pro on, and
oh, man.
the 105s were impacting close enough to us to where it was hurting my ears.
Oh, wow.
But on that one, we ended up doing a daytime exfil, which we would always try to not do, just because the risk of force is so much higher taking off in the daytime when everyone can see you and shoot at you. But I just remember seeing tracer fire rip. You know, I'm on the back of the ramp of, I think, the lead 47, and just seeing tracer fire rip up, and you couldn't see. I couldn't tell if it was going right through the helo behind us or right behind it. It ended up going right behind the helo behind us, but just kind of, I remember praying on that one that God would protect those guys. Because that was, yeah.
That's amazing.
Exciting times.
So have you dealt with PTSD, or not really, or is it something?
Man, I think everyone deals with some form of with some form of it.
Sure.
You know, whether it's, you know, being shaky or jumpy at times, or like I've definitely had that. You know, whether it's having more of a propensity for, you know, some sort of a chemical dependency, like I see where a lot of guys go down those roads. But I'd say for the most part, God has blessed me pretty strongly with there's not a whole there's not a whole lot of stuff that I honestly, there's nothing from work that I lose sleep over.
Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like you're, just based off of what you said before, because you understand the difference between killing and murder, you're able to actually minister to yourself. If you do have a hard moment, you'd be able to actually like walk yourself through it and give truth to yourself instead of just like being stuck in your feelings.
Yeah, you got something to hold on to in God's word, rather than if you're just out there, there's no foundation to anything. There's nothing to grasp onto. But I hear, and as we've been studying, through different YouTube videos and watching a ton of stuff, a lot of guys have this when they transition to civilian life. So they get out, and then it's like, what do I do? And a lot of guys struggle with depression, like you said, chemical dependency. But you're saying you really didn't struggle with that. I mean, it's something that the Lord kind of preserved you from, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of grace. And I think it's just grace, being able to look at it and go, there's been very, very few times when, guys go, oh man, do you miss it? Every once in a while, there's like one little aspect of it that I miss. Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, you look back and you think of the cool times and you know, the good post mission, or like in you know, ramps opening, and actually in y'all state, ramps opening and amazing sunrises over, you know, over the desert, and you know, I mean, there's so many cool things, but no, there's not a whole lot of times where I miss it. I was very much at the point where, I mean, when I joined, I wasn't sure if I was going to do 20 years or 5 years or whatever. And I remember seeing some guys when I first checked into SEAL Team 3 they were the old guys at the time. They were the senior chiefs when, you know, when I first got there, and they'd never done anything for real.
Wow.
And I was terrified that was going to be me.
Wow.
And I thought, man, if I just get to do one real thing, then like I'll be good.
Yeah.
And then, man, how much that has changed, you know, went from like thinking, oh, just one big mish to, man, there was points where we were doing multiple hits in a day. And if you were sitting around for more than a few hours, you're like, what the heck's going on, man? This is lame, you know, just because the op tempo had really picked up.
So you did 10 combat deployments. Do you know the number of ops you did within that?
No.
Just hundreds and hundreds?
Fair amount. Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess where I was going with this is by the time I got married and then started having kids, and then honestly part of it did play in with the political administration. Like,
yeah.
It's one of the things that really bothered me is we went from hunting Islamic extremists to VEOs, violent extremist organizations. And to me, how can we even, if it's not a nameless enemy that we're fighting Muslims, right? We're fighting Muslims that truly believe what the book says, that's the people that we were fighting. We weren't fighting the radicalized ones. We're fighting the ones that are actually following, you know, what their book tells them to do.
Right.
And I think there's a huge misunderstanding there, because people go, oh no, it's just the radicals that are doing this. And it's like, no, it's actually the ones that aren't doing anything are just, they're, you know, Muslims in name only, or, you know, they're the ones that aren't serious about their faith. The ones that are serious are the ones that are fighting, because that's what their book tells them to do. So when we made that, or when the administration made that shift to, hey, we're not fighting Islamic extremists anymore, we're fighting VEOs. I'm like, I'm pretty extreme in my beliefs. You know, like, how easy of a shift is that to go from, well, today it's VEOs of an Islamic flavor, and then tomorrow it's VEOs of, you know, of a Christian, you know. So there was some stuff there that really bothered me. It's like, if we can't name who our enemy is, how on earth are we going to fight? How are we going to do a comprehensive strategy to fight that? So there was some of that. And then there was also just a lot of, man, I got to do a lot of cool stuff. I served with some of the most amazing guys, you know, some of the most capable guys on the planet. And like, we're not going to win by just killing them all. Like, that is not how we win. I think the highest and best use for my life was focusing on, you know, relationship with Christ, relationship with wife, relationship with children, and then church, community. Like, that is a much, you know, to borrow the real estate term, highest and best use that real estate dudes talk about, you know, that's how you price something, highest and best use. So one of the things that I try to look at a couple times a year is my life being, you know, highest and best use? Am I, you know, for the King? Am I doing to the best of, you know, my ability by God's grace, you know, for doing what He wants me to do?
Right.
And so that's a long way of saying I was ready to move on at 20 years and a month when I retired, and have you know, really enjoy what I'm doing now. Really enjoy. You know, we're in a good spot in life right now.
That's great.
Just curious. I like to ask this question: where were you at on 9/11, and how did that affect? I'm assuming that ramped things up pretty quickly for you.
I was sitting on the quarterdeck actually at the command. I had to. We had one of my. Now he's a good friend of mine, a guy named Swimmer Dude, who the teams would hire. This guy was such a good swimmer, they would hire him to teach us how to swim better. This
Wow.
guy he swims marathons. He's done like crazy, like 50-mile races, for NSW, like raising money and stuff. Like the dude's a stud. So, it was a week of us doing professional development with Swimmer Dude. And so I had to take someone else's watch. So I was actually sitting on the quarterdeck when the first plane struck. And then I think I got relieved and was upstairs in the team room when the second plane struck. And then I remember being highly annoyed that I had to go back and do Swimmer Dude all afternoon because we're like, we're going to war.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, you're not. You're going to doing Swimmer Dude training. But yeah, it ramped up pretty quick after that. And we started spending up, and really the nation has been on a war footing pretty much ever since. I mean, between all the different conflict zones now, pretty crazy.
How long from 9/11 until you were in country in Iraq?
So the way the rotation ended up working, I didn't go to Afghanistan until July of 2002.
Oh,
that was almost the whole year. Yeah, we went someplace else first, and then July of 2002. Yeah, that was my first. July to October was my first pump over there.
Crazy. So I think so going back to the identity thing, we've talked a lot about this a lot lately. Again, we had Jeremy Stallnecker on for Mighty Oaks. That's what they do, is help guys when they get out, because it's obviously the number one thing that a lot of our vets struggle with is identity. You were 20 years a trained killer, and you get out, and praise God that you had, and I think it's because you had Christ, right? You had a objective foundation, but a lot of guys in that boat, they just fall apart, and that's something that's been passionate with us, and just helping guys deal with identity. And so many of these interviews that I've watched, amazing stories, and then their lives fall apart when they get out, and I keep thinking, like, man, I wish I could just share Christ with them. Like, they need
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's the most important thing. That's what we need to be doing, because that is the, that's the win that matters right there.
Yeah. So I love the fact that, and a lot of these guys that we've been working with, they're the same boat as you, where they're like, look, I'm a SEAL, but my identity's in Christ. I'm a Christian first, and it's so important, and it's encouraging to me to hear you saying those things. Like, look, yeah, I did all these things as a SEAL, but like, I'm a Christian first. That's my identity. And so I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all. I think you've said a little bit on that, but I just, from my perspective, I just want to say how much that blesses me and encourages me.
Well, I guess the one thing to kind of go down is just a lot of guys say God, family, country, but then in the next breath they'll be like, well, she married the job, like she knew what she was getting into, and versus, hey, if we truly believe that, if it truly is God, family, country, and country being many different layers of things, but then it really should be our relationship with Christ is most important, and then next our relationship to our spouses, and then children, and then after that, country. For me, country was part job, part patriotism, all those different levels. Now I would look at it as it's a lot. Country really goes, kind of church, community, county, state, friends, nation, like there's differing levels of country where that falls out right there. But yeah, I think it's so, it's one of the things I told my wife when we got married was that, hey, if this is too much for you, let me know. And I will leave, because, when you get married, it's, work is no longer the most important thing. And I will tell you, like, as I look back, me going through buds was absolutely an idol. Like, it was the most important thing for me. Like, whether I went to church, I wasn't going to church a whole lot, maybe like right before Hell Week or something, but not. And it's, it's interesting. Like I definitely remember praying, was it Philippians 4:6-7? I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Like, over and over and over again, especially, on some of the times where it was really cold and we're gonna have to get back in the water, just like constantly, saying that verse over and over again. But it's it's really liberating if you can actually lay out your priorities like that, because then decision-making process in life is so much simpler, because you can just go, well, okay, I can do this other work stuff, but this other work stuff will cause me to be in shady situations. And like, while I might make more money doing this, but then it's going to cause problems with, being away from the family and all the things that entail, and so it's like, it's much easier when you can lay it out and go, well, God's the most important thing is this. And then every decision, or every major decision, at least, base it off of that. Is this going to, draw me closer to God or remove me from it? And then, is this going to strengthen my marriage or weaken it? Is this going to strengthen my relationship, my, the impact that I can have on my children, and it's a fine line to walk, especially for me on the training side of things. Now it would be very easy to fill up the calendar and just be gone all the time. But that would have a positive effect on the pocketbook, and it would have a negative effect on, on the marriage and on the children and on, ability to do really what's more important, which is, how am I following after Christ? Well, it's, through marriage, through raising kids to know and love Jesus, and then through being involved in church, doing worship stuff, doing father-son ministry. Like, those things are really, those are the things that have a much higher, if we talk return on investment,
absolutely,
that's the long play right there, absolutely. Is to do, spend your life in those pursuits, vice, chasing money or fame or power or any of those other things that the world tells us is important.
How many years were you married while in?
That's my question.
So about 7.5 or so.
When you got married, did that drastically change the way you approach work? And I've heard guys that say, like, well, once they got married and started having kids, that it made it difficult for them to shut that off when it was go time. Like, maybe they would take them. Like, I've heard Christian guys say, like, I did pray for my wife and kids and then shut that part of my brain off, essentially, and focus on the work ahead. So how did that work for you?
So I couldn't tell you where it is, but I know in the Old Testament it talks about when the young men get married, they shouldn't go off to war for a year.
Yeah.
And man, I see so much wisdom in that now. I did not have the luxury of doing that. I got married when we were on a 9-month cycle, so I was spending 3 months out of every 9 months overseas, and then 3 months stateside, but gone training, and then 3 months we were supposed to be at home. So I basically had a 6-month window from coming back to get married, to ask her dad, propose, set up a wedding, get married, and then deploy again. So it was pretty compressed timeline. So that first deployment was definitely harder for me. It was also one of the sportier deployments that I was on, and it definitely was harder, I would say, mentally to work through some of that stuff than previously. But then also, like, later, as I'd been married longer, it was like it kind of got back to maybe not quite the level of ease as it was prior to being married, but not nearly as bad as right after that first deployment, or right during that first deployment. I mean, I got the 2 weeks into, so we'd been married 2 months. I go on deployment and I'm sitting in a tent in Jalalabad, Afghanistan, and on a little Panasonic Toughbook, checking the Hotmail or whatever the internet was at the time, and I get she sends a picture of a positive EPT. Awesome. And so that was kiddo number 1. I actually found out the first 4, I think. I found out either overseas, like I just left for deployment, or one of them I was actually I'd taken a flight to Bragg, and then like I had an hour or two before the flight. And so I called home, and she's like, well, I picked up a test on the way home after dropping you off. And guess what? So
sounds like your wife's also quite the hero.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
She is amazing. I definitely married up.
That's so awesome. Well, cool. So let's just transition into what you're doing now. And man, I love what you're doing now. And I know I was texting you like some of your training stuff actually has helped me in proficiency with my handgun. So I'm appreciative of that. But talk about what you're doing now. Use this as an opportunity just to promote your company and what you're doing and the ministry you're doing and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we have 3 businesses. Our first one that we started the day after I retired is called the full name, American Tactical Shooting Instruction. That very quickly, guys just started calling it Amtech Shooting. So we now have an official doing business as Amtech Shooting. That's our website, amtechshooting.com. And so it's a training company. Our mission statement is to teach good Americans how to protect themselves and their families better. So that is really our approach. Probably the thing that I am best at and also most passionate about is something that we call integrated combatives or pistol combatives. And it's basically not just running a pistol or throwing punches or using a blade, but how to integrate all 3. So that's probably what I enjoy teaching the most. It's also what I generally try to get guys to do first, because when we look at the hierarchy of what are you most likely to use, well, from a training perspective, number one, awareness, number one thing that keeps us alive. Then the next would be 100% safety with your tools. Right. If you're unsafe with your firearm, like just put it away, like go get real training. But until you can be 100% safe, put it away. The next would be making sure that when you pull the gun out, it actually goes bang. Right. It sounds like a really simple thing. I've watched a lot of professional guys when you put them on the timer or some sort of stress thing, pull out a gun and empty chamber. And then next would be clean draw stroke from concealment. So being able to pull your gun out, pull your pistol out from concealment. And then the next 2, and I put these on equal footing, would be combative weapons retention shooting. So being able to throw elbows, basically grapple with your other strong hand, what we call it, while you're pulling a pistol out. And then the other one is other strong hand only blade deployment and targeting. So being able to, from my left side, right, that's my other strong side, being able to produce a blade from there. So that if my right hand is busy, right, I'm swimming underhooks on someone, or I'm doing whatever it is, doing don't look at me concept, or fingers and eye, whatever it is. If right hand is busy, left hand pulls a lethal tool. If left hand is busy, right hand pulls a lethal tool. So that's kind of what I probably teach the most of is those. And we've got 6 different specific pistol classes, all with a little bit different focuses on different aspects of that. Then we also teach carbine work, and then also precision rifle work as well, which I enjoy, and I enjoy teaching all of that stuff. And I enjoy the variety of it as well. And then so it's turned into a really when I first started doing this, I really didn't know if I was going to be teaching mostly cops or military guys, and just really got open doors. And my normal students they're good guys that are professionals and whatever their field is, and they're just serious about carrying a gun. And so they'll do a class with me or a class with some of the other top guys in industry, and that's just what they like to do. And so a lot of these guys are extremely proficient with their tools, and so it's just kind of been a really cool. I've made a ton of good friends doing this. Probably more than half the places I go, I stay at friends' houses. Guys pick me up at the airport. We hang out, we get to know each other's families. It's just been a really cool environment. And then I guess probably one of the coolest things is when we first did our website, we have I think I call it primary philosophy. And I put a statement of faith on there. And I wish I could say we were going to do that regardless. But honestly, I had to think about it for a while. Hey, is this, do I need to be really out front with my faith or not? I really felt convicted that no, I should be bold about it. If we're talking about things that matter, well, that matters more than any little strategy or any little tip or trick that will keep you alive for the next 40 years. Right? Being right with God through His Son Christ is the most important thing. So we put that statement on there, and it's been a huge blessing. I mean, I get a ton of guys that are believers that come to classes, but then also I get a lot of guys that aren't believers that would probably never go to church. They would never sit down and do this. And on any 2-day class that I do, the first thing we do on day 2 is a mindset talk. And part of the end of that mindset talk is just talking about dying well. And, it's a thing now in industry, dying well. And industry looks at, firearms protection industry looks at dying well, really in a kind of neo-pagan, dying with sword in hand, bullets in the front, vice bullets in the back type of thing, charging into battle, protecting, yourself or your loved ones. And I just get to lay out for guys that, hey, dying well is being right with God.
That's cool.
And, and knowing where you're, like, just having that assurance of salvation, not because anything that I've done, but because what Christ did on the cross for me is so comforting. And yeah, I mean, so I get to share that with guys, and it's a super cool platform. And and I've grown in doing this. Like, I think the first couple mindset talks was like, at the very end, it was like, get right with God, and then God has really given me a like boldness in this area. And I almost feel like they're little mini sermons now. Like I really like to just kind of lay out Peter and, what awesome. Makes a guy like Peter go from where he was to, upside down crucifixion because he wasn't worthy to die the same way his Savior was. Like, what changes a guy like that? And the only answer to that is the resurrection happened. Like, that's the only way that people's lives are transformed. So it's been a really cool, it's been a blessing to be able to, to share the gospel with guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, Kyle, can you go ahead and bring that up? I got the website up now, so it's amtacshooting.com. And if you guys are interested in the different courses.
So that's our training. Yeah, so that's our training company. Sorry,
no,
plug for two more as well. Then out of the, one of the things I've been involved in for a long time is an organization called Psyop Collie. I've gotten so much blade and fighting and mindset stuff from those guys. I mean, a lot of those guys are like, they're the guys that I go to. Well, Psyop Collie and Ptsd Collie, those are the guys that I go to for professional development. And so a lot of the stuff that almost all the stuff they do involves blades. And so that was something that I was teaching with. And so a few years ago, I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we were just talking about, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you had a fixed blade knife that would fit in your pocket? And like, I kind of explained what I was, wanting. And then, hey, talk to you later. And then like 2 months later, a blade showed up that my buddy made for me. And then that turned into, we talk about it, and, like every month I was getting a couple more blades from him, and we're just kind of going back and forth like this. And then it got to a point where I was like, man, this is really cool. No one else, like, kind of in our tribe community was doing pocket fixed blade knives. So I kind of went to the guys that I respected and said, hey, like, everyone good with me doing this? And, with starting a business doing this, and, got the thumbs up from guys. And so that's how the blade, we call it the Northman. And that was the guy's name that made those first, a bunch of the initial prototypes and whatnot. And he actually just passed away this past September due to COVID, of all things. Like,
no way.
So yeah, and then that has really grown. We have a couple different models now. So that's been a great business. And then we just recently started Amtac Gear as well. And that's kind of for the, right now it's, t-shirts, hats, beanies, stickers, patches, kind of swag stuff. But okay. The intent is to go, plate carriers, backpacks, other actual gear as well. in the future. But that's our latest venture.
I actually have it up, Kyle. I don't know if you had that pull up or not. I have the amtechblades.com, looking at the Northman right now here, because I'm like pretty much all Viking, so I was like, oh, I like the name Northman, because I thought maybe that's what it meant, but apparently I was wrong. So
speaking of names, I don't know how you spell your last name, but I feel like just some people, like, if a kid named like Tom Burns grows up and he becomes a firefighter, everyone's like, yeah, that makes sense. But Rapier, I feel like it makes sense that you'd be involved in weapons training, or I don't know.
Somewhat ironic, right? That name,
it was all built in right there for you. You had to live up to the name.
A thrusting sword.
Yeah.
Right?
That's cool. I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
so
I think that's what they use in like fencing, mostly. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah, there was.
So yeah, I appreciate. I mean, just talking about blades real quick. You convinced me to get a fixed blade, so thank you for that, sir. Because I always carried a folded one, which I still carry as well. I just use that to open stuff. But yeah, I think Zach sent me a video when you were talking about fixed blades, and I was just like, yeah, I should have a fixed blade. So I carry one, and then, but I love that. I love the Northman, and that it's small, that you can stick it in your pocket. Because I know I've seen how you carry yours in your belt, but I may or may not have some overlapping flesh that makes it a little difficult to carry in my belt line. So I love the fact that you can shove it in your pocket, and it's not gonna. You can conceal it, and no one's gonna know what's going on. So.
Most guys look at it and they think it's a folder. And I actually do. I carry the Northman on my strong side in my pocket, and then I carry either a Magnus or a Minuteman on my other strong side on my belt line. And that's what I would tell everyone to do. If you already carry a gun, like put the blade on your other strong side, because being able to deploy a lethal tool with either hand makes you an order of magnitude harder to deal with. I mean, just it's hard to control both hands and then draw your own tools at the same time.
Sure.
So it's a
No, I appreciate that so much. And one thing quickly, I know we've been going a while here, but one thing we learned from our SEAL buddies, and I've heard you say similar things, is just like it's all about control, and you want to evade first, right? Like I think as guys, we like kind of get macho, and we like we like have fantasies about someone attacking us and beating them up and stuff like that, and one thing I've learned is just like, no, that's last ditch effort. You want to, and I know that's some of the training you do, is like you want to evade first, but when it's go time, it's go time. But like that's last ditch effort. It's not worth that. I think I heard you telling Ritlin, like you could do that and you could go to jail, and then your family doesn't have you, or you could just take an L on this one and
take a verbal loss. I mean, and go home and eat dinner and be like, man, I had such a good comeback, and I thought about it 30 minutes later. Like that, your life is so much better than winning the confrontation, and then paying the consequence. I mean, one of the big things I always try and put out in a class is that it is always a higher level win to win with a lower level of violence. Right. If you can either, whether it's talking and making a joke, or, buying a guy a beer, whatever it is, like, I'd rather take a verbal L than burn the guy, even if I'm, and I think the more you train, the more you're also like, there's no one, hopefully the older and more mature you get, there's no longer could I take this guy or not? It's just like, okay, like it's not, number one, there are no fair fights, right? That only happens like at a wrestling match, or like, very much in tribe. It's the only way there's going to ever be a fair fight. And hopefully as we get older and more mature, like we're not doing those anymore. So you have to realize that, man, if as a guy that is carrying tools and proficient at using tools, it's incumbent on you not to get involved in any kind of altercation, because you're like, what happens if you start to lose? You're like, oh, this guy's weaker and smaller than me, so I can push him around. And then he's like a really good grappler, and he takes you down and goes knee on belly and starts bouncing your head off the concrete. At that point, it's not a bar fight anymore. At that point, it's I'm going to die. Yeah. And guys that train with and carry tools will use them at that point. And so it's way better just, hey, think through that. It goes right back to that willingness piece. think through your willingness ahead of time.
Yes.
Think through what am I willing to do under what circumstances? Does this make sense? Talk about it with your wife, socialize it amongst your peers. Like, hey, if this happens, this is what we're going to do. And I mean, so I think we can do that violence wise, but, and we should do that violence wise, but I think now with, I think you could also tie that in somewhat with tyranny and,
yeah, absolutely.
At what is the correct response if this happens? Yeah. What are we going to do? Because the answer is probably not, we're going to put our cold plate carriers on and go start shooting people. Right, that's probably not the correct response.
Exactly.
The correct response is probably some sort of non-violent
defensive posture,
maybe non-compliance.
Yeah.
So like, hey, make them do something to you that. So we get the IO win basically, like, because you can't go first in something like that, right? You have to, which is why you have to think through that willingness piece ahead of time, like, and you might learn that guys around you are like, you might cut guys away because they're posturing a lot and they're saying, "Oh, I'm going to do this if this happens," and they're like, "No, dude, like I'm not good with because." Especially when we start, kind of crossing over into, the protection side of things and the liberty side of things, right? Not everyone on that side is believers or are believers.
Right.
So we have to look at that and go, well, anything that I'm rogering up to do, like I better make sure that fits in with my theology as well.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
Otherwise, I don't have a congruent worldview, and again, you're just going to end up with regret because. Yeah. Maybe you've got a group of guys and you've been posturing and then you get painted into a corner and it's like, no, get those identities right, figure out, think those things through ahead of time.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the mindset conversation is, if you have the tools, you better know how to use them. Don't just be carrying around just to carry them around.
Yeah.
Like know how to use them. But two, like you said, like you need to think ahead and be ready to, if, God forbid you are faced with a situation like that, you should know ahead of time how you're going to respond. You should be trained. You should think through those things and not wait until the moment of surprise. And, one thing we learned a lot from our guys, and you probably know the talk is, our biggest enemy is our ego, right? Like, like put your ego to death. Like that's not the time to be showing your ego. Like,
I was going to say, it kind of sounds like, I mean, obviously I'm a female, but it kind of sounds like an important lesson just to learn as
in general,
a man, like, but just when to fight, what you're willing to, don't just fly by the seat of your pants. Like, put some thought into it.
Amen.
Yeah, because
there is a time to step up and do it.
Oh, sure.
Right.
And there's also a time to say, no, this is not the time. And knowing those two, when each of those is correct, is where the wisdom comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that brings me to the last thing here. I know we've kept you for a while, and I appreciate your time. But so you are an elder at your church, and I know it's a small country church, and we'll keep that name to ourselves for now. But you do a really cool ministry, which I'm really excited about. Was you call it Father-Son ministry? Is that what you call it?
Yes.
And so a lot of what we just talked about is what you do in that ministry. So just tell us about that and the things you do. I love what you guys are doing.
So Father-Son ministry started when we got out here, and I'd kind of gotten part of the idea from you guys familiar with Colonel Cooper? It was an Arizona guy, like World War II vet, kind of started a lot of the practical shooting. He used to do a rant in the back of Guns and Ammo magazine. It was Colonel's or Cooper's Corner, and he would some of his ramblings were trivial and some of them were very profound. And one of the more profound ones was, what should a young man know as he grows up? Shoot and ride hard, shoot straight, like those types of things. And so that kind of got me thinking about, what should a young man know? Well, obviously you should, with Christ follower as my primary identity, like we want our boys to grow up and know and love Jesus. Like that's the number one thing that we are trying to espouse within this. But then also they should be capable, right? So and one of the great ways to do that is with grappling. And then also they should know a lot of things about a lot of different topics. There's a great Heinlein quote that, a man should be able to change a diaper and plan an invasion and cook dinner and all these things. And then he ends it with, specialization is for insects. It's a great Robert Heinlein quote. And I'm butchering it there horribly. But it's like we should know a lot of things about a lot of different topics. I was woefully deficient on that. Like I didn't know anything about wiring an electrical outlet. I didn't know how to weld. I didn't know how to do plumbing stuff. There's so much stuff that I was deficient on when I left home. And so just looking at what, I want my boys to be better than me when they leave the home. So the idea was, okay, this whole thing, we want our boys to know and love Jesus. We want them to be capable men, right? So that is, we're doing jiu-jitsu all the time. We've done boxing blocks. We've done other striking blocks. We've done, weeks long shooting blocks where that's all we're doing is shooting. But so a normal day would, or the way it started, a normal day would go, or evening, we would start with jiu-jitsu for 45 minutes to an hour. Then we do a 15 to 20 minute Bible lesson, and then have another 45 minutes to an hour of life skill at the end of it. Anything from, we've butchered hogs. We've, it's fairly regular. The boys will build fires, do shelters, go on hikes, change the oil, get a vehicle unstuck, just like man skills that you should be able to do. And so that has been, so we've changed it a little bit because that format was ending up being about 3 hours. And, with younger boys, and especially in the wintertime, like we weren't getting out of there till after 9 sometimes. So we've changed the format a little bit, and now generally we'll do one of the things, so tonight we're going to do, we pray first, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance after we pray. And that was an important thing that, just right from the get-go, God is ahead of country. So, that's the order. And then, so we're going to go for a hike later today, and then, or it'll be this evening. And then we'll probably do some sort of fire test with the boys as well, because we've got some newer boys that haven't done it yet. So that just involves, they get a ferro rod and a single Vaseline soaked cotton ball, and they have to get a sustainable fire going. So,
that's awesome.
3-inch branches going. And if they do that, then we buy them a cool ferro rod that they can use to get the fire going. So, they'll probably all need the cotton balls today, but if it's drier out, then we take the cotton balls away, and they've got to find their own, primary tinder, to use. So that's just been a cool thing. And then, so the idea was, originally it would be kind of a missional type thing, and that the training would be cool enough so that even non-believers would come and then, air quotes, suffer through the gospel in the middle of it. That's why we put the gospel in the middle, so you couldn't show up late or leave early and miss that part. It's really, most of the guys are believers that come. So it has been much more of it's almost been like a Bible study. And I would say it's been every bit as good for the men that are there. And, and initially I was thinking it's mostly for the boys, but it's been huge for them. It's been huge for me. I mean, I went, when we first started, our old pastor, I'm like, Adam, I'm good doing the jiu-jitsu and the life skill, but maybe every other month I can do the Bible lesson. Cause it was like a really big deal for me to, to sit down, and it was just hard to do. And then, by God's grace, it has gotten significantly easier. And now, now I just feel like this stuff jumps out at me. Like, this morning I was reading, the 10 Commandments just in prep for this. And there's a couple things that just jumped out at me, and I'm like, that's like, we're going to talk about the law and then grace. Like, that's what we're going to do tonight. So yeah, it's been a great, it's been super cool to do that. And we're actually, I feel like we've got one of my friends has a chapter of father-son ministry going on in New Hampshire right now. We've had at various times, we had one down in Atlanta going for a little while. We had one in Washington going on for a while. I feel like there's a huge need for doing this.
Oh, absolutely.
And I feel like at some point we were probably going to do some sort of 501c3 with father son.
You should.
With the idea of kind of train the trainer model.
Yeah.
That's one of the other things with our with the MTAC training center. That was one of the, so we're building a structure where guys can train and, live and whatnot. And so it's one of the things we've been thinking and praying through there is could we do father son ministry camps there where, hey, you come with your boys and it's going to be a time of, getting to know God more, having, focused teaching times, focused worship times. But then also like we're gonna shoot guns and we're gonna fight and you guys are gonna go in the woods and build stuff and navigate and like do cool man stuff. But with a Christ-centered focused.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
yeah, you guys can be praying about that because I'm still not 100% exactly what that looks. I feel like when it's go time, I will know 100% like this is what we need to do, and I'm not quite there yet. Like the momentum is building. So that's father son ministry in a nutshell right there.
I love it, man. And we didn't even mention you actually live off grid now, so you've probably had to learn a lot of those actual skills you're teaching just to survive on a daily basis.
Yeah, our only heat source is wood. So
yeah.
That's every morning when I get up in the basically October through about April, I'm lighting a fire and we keep that fire going during the colder months all day long.
Are you chopping all your own wood too?
Oh no. No, it's no.
Crazy.
There's not enough hours. Not enough hours in the day.
Just as a business thing, like I've learned that it is more like I'm capable of doing it. I have done it. I will still do it if we have down trees and I need to chop them up anyways.
Yeah.
I'll cut them up into rounds and then now I'll have the boys split it.
I was going to say, when you have kids, you don't have to chop the wood anymore.
they're getting old enough to do it, but it's just been if I look at the amount of time involved for me to put up 5 or 6 cords of wood versus, what am I not doing while I'm doing that?
Yeah, sure.
Be it, making phone calls, talking to guys, doing another course. It's just, it makes more sense dollars wise.
Sure.
To buy the wood.
Right.
It's kind of the bottom line.
Well, I love that you're doing that. We do a similar thing here, just not as cool. Not even in the same realm as cool, but like do some stuff.
Ours
like
is
that.
pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
That's next level.
Yeah, that's next level. Yeah, because Zach and I we're like carpenters by trade or whatever, so we're actually going to be doing one with the boys where we're teaching them like how to frame a wall and
that's awesome.
Drywall it.
Yeah, we call it biblical manhood training.
That's so vital.
Yeah,
to teach the boys how to do that stuff, and to teach some men how to do that stuff too.
Sure. Yeah, exactly right.
Just we got to figure out how to teach them how to dress a hog. That's got to be like then we're next level.
Yeah,
but we're not there yet.
I'll go buy a pig.
Yeah,
somewhere.
YouTube.
Man, I so appreciate you, Bill, and just having you on today. Do you guys have any other questions you want to ask them? I know we're
good.
Running out of time on our own end here, so. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll talk some more. I know we talked about some stuff offline that we could do in the future. So, love to have you on again sometime. And God bless you, man. I'm so encouraged by what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah,
Joy's like, whatever. I'm just kidding.
She loved it.
Zach and I are like,
we're like
boys over here.
Yeah.
Some of the SEAL military episodes get a little manly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, well, that's why we have you on here to bring some balance.
Yeah.
So, well, you guys, thank you again always so much for your support. You keep the lights on. We don't have to chop wood to keep this place heated, so that's cool. We thank you guys for helping us pay the bills. So.
Doing this off grid might be a little.
It'd be a little tricky.
A little difficult.
A little tricky. lucky. So
I've done these before and had the power go out.
Oh
on
no!
Me. So now it's the kids know, like, and Mariah knows, like, she can't run laundry, or run the dishwasher or anything else that might be a high draw when I'm doing a podcast, because obviously we can't have the power going out, because as soon as the power goes out, like 5 seconds later, the internet goes out.
Oh, right. That's
so
hilarious. See, that's what I'm talking about. So thank you. Well, I will say one thing that we've learned from our SEAL buddies that's been kind of our mantra is stay hard. And
get hard, stay hard.
Stay hard. Yeah. And so we're very thankful for that mindset. I mean, it's really, this year has been difficult.
Yeah.
It's been a difficult year, and that's definitely helped us stay the course.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Joy, you stay lady. I don't know. Stay mama. Stay feminine.
Get feminine.
Stay feminine.
But
I mean, that's if you want to talk about a real message for today's culture.
Oh,
there you go.
Straight up. So as a reminder, next week is our rally in Colorado, in Denver. Pastor Jeff will be out there for that on Saturday the 2nd, and for our bill there to end abortion in Colorado, and then we will be in Louisiana on April 30th for our bill there as well. So you guys can, if you're in the areas, please come help support those bills there.
Absolutely.
And, I think that's all I got. So
yeah, awesome work you guys are doing on that, the anti-abortion stuff, by the way.
Thank you,
like
brother.
well done.
Thank you.
I appreciate that a ton. That blesses me for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Pastor Zach,
see you later, alligators. Go to AR 500, AR Republic, and buy some stuff from them. Great guys.
And Joy the girl.
See ya.
Stay hard.